Okay, it's a little past 1:30, and we're ready to start the next session, which is the Assessors annual meeting with the State Board of Equalization. The Honorable Chairman Jerome E. Horton presiding, and State Board of Equalization. Mr. Horton.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, let's do some assessing. On behalf of the Board of Equalization, welcome to the annual meeting between the Board of Equalization and the county assessors. As you know, the Constitution requires us that we meet annually. I've often wondered why it took a constitutional amendment for individuals such as ourselves to get together, because we have so much in common. This past year, we generated somewhere around $100 billion for public schools and all the necessities of the state of California. I think you all deserve a round of applause for your work over the years. However, despite our best efforts, still 9 million individuals in the state of California live below the poverty line. Somewhere around 270,000 children are homeless, but yet still involved and engaged in our public schools. Approximately 1/3 of the welfare recipients in the United States are right here in the state of California. Our challenges are great, but pale in comparison to the leadership and commitment that exists in this room. Over the last year, we made significant strides. We've created jobs in the state of California, working with our assessors. We created opportunities in the state of California. Businesses have grown significantly, I believe, as a result of the effort of the assessors and the Board of Equalization. I believe each of us has a role in energizing California's economy, and today, as we begin to engage fundamentally a little bit more in the future and working together, we all are better off, in my belief, with a strong middle class, real opportunities for the poor, and relentless focus on the future. So without further ado, it's my honor to have joined my distinguished colleagues here, and I'd like to recognize them and call the meeting of the Board of Equalization to order. First, let me acknowledge and recognize the elected officials and the county assessors that have been elected over the past year, some 14 of you, newly elected officials. Would you please stand? All right, a round of applause. Well, yes, can you guys please introduce yourselves? I was going to swear you in since I had you stand. By the power vested in me, I hereby announce you as assessors. Bob, let's start out.
Former State Senator Bob Dutch. I had the honor of serving with Mr. Horton and Mr. Runner, and looking forward to continuing my work in public service.
Okay, the rest of you, don't be shy.
My name is Jeff Frank. I think I might be the assessor-elect of LA County.
Welcome, Jeff.
City Council person for the city of Moderator, twice mayor, and Moderator County assessor-elect.
All right.
Diane Brown, assessor-elect of Kinnee County.
We also are privileged to have with us the distinguished Mr. Larry Ward, the Assessor and President of the Association. Larry, thank you so very much for the service over the years. And then we have the President-elect, Mr. Marc Tonnesen, who introduced me. What a short introduction. I love it. Thank you, Marc. Just continue those short introductions and you'll do well. And now, members, it's my honor to call upon the members to share a few thoughts, and then we will turn it over to the chairman of the Property Tax Committee. We'll start with the newly elected Controller, Betty Yee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. It is always a pleasure to join you at our annual convening. First, I want to congratulate all of the assessors-elect and welcome you to your new positions and obviously offering our organization and institution as a resource to all of you. But what I want to just say to all of you is thank you. Thank you for continuing to do what you do, the customer service that you provide throughout many of these years with fewer resources, and hopefully that will begin to change as our revenue situation begins to look more positive. But we are partners in administering this property tax administration in this property tax system, and I hope that you can continue to count on the Board of Equalization for helping to develop the tools and resources that you need to be successful. But I want to commend particularly the organization, the California Assessors Association. We could not do our work in being a equal partner in the administration of the system without your input, your expertise, and your ongoing engagement with this board. And I want to congratulate and thank President Larry Ward for being a constant presence before our board over a whole host of myriad of issues, not only during your tenure as president, but just throughout your tenure. It's just so very much appreciated. And congratulations to President-elect Marc Tonnesen. I get to brag that he's one of my own from our district, but who has also served with distinction, and I expect will continue to be a presence before our board. Some challenges that face us going forward, and I know that as I step into my new role, I will not be a stranger to these issues affecting county assessors and the property tax system, but hope that as we move forward, that as we face some of these challenges, and some of them will be ones as a result of just changes within our economic landscape, and some will be changes as it relates to perhaps the will of the voters. But regardless of what the challenges are, I would just welcome early and ongoing engagement about how we're going to continue to work together to continue to have a system that has integrity and one that really delivers for the people of the state of California. I will just conclude by saying that over the course of my almost 10 years on this board, I have truly appreciated the engagement of the assessors in the first equalization district. Could not have begun to get my feet wet in these issues without the early welcome of all of you. And now moving forward, just very, very proud of the relationship that we've established over the years, and look forward to a more robust relationship with all of you as your next statewide constitutional officer. Thank you so much.
Member Mandel.
Thank you, Mr. Horton. Mr. Chung couldn't be here today. I think he's in Israel, but I asked him, since he was an acting member of the Board of Equalization and then elected to 2 full terms, so he had 10 years as a Board of Equalization member, and he's about closing out his 8th year as state controller, and therefore ex officio on the Board of Equalization, and probably worked with assessors when he was working for Mr. Sherman before he was the acting member. So it's been a long time, even though they were in LA County, which really only had the one assessor, or assessor office. He worked a lot with all of you in the association. I asked him, well, did he have a message for me to bring this year? And so I have the message. He said it. I put it on the Post-it note. Anyway, he wanted to thank all of you and the association. It's been a great pleasure for him working with the assessors, and he wishes you all the best in the future as he moves on from this position. So Thank you from Mr. Chung.
And now the chairman of the Property Tax Committee, Senator, Assemblyman, Member George Runner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is good to be here, and I don't know, they must have offered an incentive to attend in San Rafael here. It's a huge group. It must have been a great location to choose to have your time together. And we are glad to be here. You know, I'm like you. You know, it's always good to have elections behind you, right? I tell my friends and people who are not in elected office, you just never know what it's like until your name is actually on the ballot, and how good you feel when it's all over with. And so you are all to be congratulated, both those of you who are coming into your roles new for the first time as the assessor, many of you coming in from the ranks of the office itself, but also for many of you who have been reelected. Congratulations again on your role of public service and your desire to do what is right and best for taxpayers. In fact, my note here says, and I think it's so true, you know, I think we really come together with a common goal, and that's to ensure taxpayers are treated fairly and respect at all levels of government. And sometimes those can be challenging issues for us. Sometimes, you know, the tax process itself, parts and pieces of it can be a bit challenging as we interpret, as we try to apply tax law. It is not sometimes the easiest process for us to go on. But ultimately, I think we all have within our desire, and as I'm sure many of us talked about as to why we are in these offices that we hold, and that is we want to make sure that taxpayers are treated fairly and respected in the process. And so I thank you for your desire and your involvement in doing that. You know, I think this is going to be a year of change for a lot of us. I mean, you have a good number of new elected assessors in your midst. Our board has got some new members going to be joining us, and so we're going to be finding our way through and meeting a lot of new personalities, both amongst ourselves and the board, but also within our districts. One of the things that we're going to be doing after our session here is we'll be doing a breakout session, and I think each of us are located kind of in a different spot, and you can choose to come and visit us if you're either by district or just you want to come by and say hello. Come on by and give us a chance to kind of interact a little more intimately in regards to our district and what's going on, and for us to share some time together. Today will give us some opportunities. We got some panelists that are going to be joining us to talk about some issues that are before us, some issues of concern, some issues that we want to put on the table for us to have a discussion about. And so we'll be doing that shortly before we go to our breakout session. Chairman, you want me to just continue?
Yes.
Okay. On my notes here, I had some remarks by Larry Ward and by Marc Tonnesen, and I don't know if we've already had those or not. So I don't know if there's some additional words that you guys want to do. We certainly would invite you to do that now. Where you're right here is just great. They're just there.
Honorable Chairman Horton, board members, fellow assessors, staff, Larry Ward, Assessor, County Clerk Recorder for Riverside County, but also the president of this association. And again, I'd like to congratulate Senator Runner, Board Member Horton, on your re-election. Ms. Shee, congratulations. Hard-fought battle. Glad it only happens every 4 years, though, I bet.
Yeah.
I know we actually have 18 new assessors, at least by my count. 7 are from someplace else. So, and we also have 4 of the 5 large counties will have a new assessor, including Riverside, LA, Orange, and San Bernardino. So lots of new faces coming around. But I think lots of opportunities because there is a lot going to be going on. I would say that one of the positives over the last year is we had an increase in value statewide, about 4.5%. Stanislaus County stopped at 11.5%, so congratulations to Assessor Greinke. I know we worked with State Board staff, also Caltax, and Howard Jarvis Association to put together a kind of press release, because one of the issues that we're facing is a lot of people still don't believe we can increase the value more than 2%, and we surprised them at that. But I think that was a collaborative effort, got something out that I think was beneficial, and I think the educational process that we need to do on Prop 8 values coming back is going to continue. One of my goals this past year was to improve the communication between the board and the Assessors Association. Maybe we wouldn't have to go to Sacramento so often. But Chairman Horton, you met with myself, Sharon Moeller from LA, and Webster for a couple hours a few months ago. I think it was a very beneficial meeting, and hopefully we can continue that, especially with the new board members coming in. I think that'll be a real positive. Finally, for us, the longstanding funding issue made some progress this year with the State County Assessors Partnership Agreement Program. Although only 8 counties are involved, it's a start, and we're hoping that this pilot program will take off and that within 3 years we'll be able to have 58 counties having the opportunity to get this additional money. I'd also like to say that we've had a really good open relationship, working relationship with State Board staff. Dean Kinnee, David Gow, the staff have been very receptive to us, always willing to meet and talk about issues, and I think that's a real positive for us. So finally, I'd just like to say, as my year is ending here as the President of the Assessors Association, it's been a real pleasure to work with you and your staff, and I wish you all the best in the coming year. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chair Horton and board members, for inviting me to speak. And as my colleague said, congratulations on your re-elections and elections, and congratulations to Controller Chung, now going to become Treasurer. I got that right. So anyway, I want to thank my colleagues for putting me in this position. I understand the election was a landslide, so I'm very happy about that. I also want to congratulate, as the board did, the 18 newly elected assessors. And my message to you is I encourage you to get involved in the CAA. It's very important. We do a lot of good, and you know there's a lot of committees you can serve on, no matter where you came from, whether you came from an assessor's office or from outside the assessor's office. It's a good learning experience. Congratulations to the 18 that are retiring. A lot of you were mentors to me, and I appreciate it, and I look forward to still hearing from you after you retire. Not really. Back to the new assessors, as President Ward did last year, I'm going to have a meeting in January. It's going to be in Sacramento, and I've been working with board staff to set it up. It's going to be our first business meeting of the year. However, the first day, which we're still working on it, I think I've got it as Thursday, the 22nd of January, and I'll give you more details later. The first day, the first half of the first day is going to be new assessor orientation. So all of the assessors, all you newly elected assessors, I encourage you to attend, and we will have hopefully the chairs of all the committees, many, if not all, of the officers of the association, as well as Board of Equalization is going to take up about half the meeting with their presentation. So it'll be really good, and I encourage you to attend. Also, I encourage you to stay for the education standards, legislative, and then executive committee meetings that follow afterwards. Just briefly, a couple of things I plan to address next year. A lot of them are carryover. We've got embedded software, which Mr. Stone is championing, and we have a white paper rolling out on December 9th in Santa Clara, University of Santa Clara, or Santa Clara University. And we're going to continue to watch that. The ad hoc committee, the survey committee that we're working with the Board of Equalization, we'll continue with that. We got some, positive feedback. As Larry mentioned, SCAPAP, I call it son of PTAP. What Mr. Ward didn't mention is he put out a survey to the counties to ask if you applied, why, and if you didn't apply, why. If you could answer those surveys and get them back to him, if you haven't already, that would be great. I look forward to our meeting this afternoon about partnering with Board of Equalization. And legislative matters, we've got a few new things, aircraft committee, aircraft issues, as well as we're going to readdress the exemption staff that was vetoed, or the exemption legislation that was vetoed by the governor. And one last thing on WebEx, which is it's been going very well. Matter of fact, a lot better than we anticipated. And I think Leslie Davis was telling me she sent out 456 certifications. So it's going very well. But again, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to invite Richard Moon to come on up. Richard's going to share with us a little bit from his perspective, BOE's perspective as our lead tax counsel on property tax, some issues of litigation and also some legal opinion issues that would be appropriate for us to have a little discussion about.
Right. Good afternoon. It's nice to see many of the assessors and the board members again. I have about 15 to 20 minutes to go through some of the court cases that have come out recently, and there have been many. Some of you may remember back in April, another member of the legal department had been at your meeting in LA and had gone through some of the court cases, and since that time in April, there have been 6 published decisions. So it's been a very busy time for the courts. And so I've listed the cases here, and of course in 15 to 20 minutes, I'm not going to have time to go through all of these in detail, but I did notice in your schedule that you have several county councils coming tomorrow to do what looks like a very similar thing, so you can save up all your questions and ask them tomorrow. The first couple of these I'm going to go through really, really quickly, and again, my apologies in advance. The first case here, the first 2 cases are actually about procedural issues, which may or may not interest you. But this one, I think, the importance of this one is that the taxpayer did not, essentially asked for a tax refund at the court instead of challenging the AAB's decision about their jurisdiction. And there's a technical difference between the two, such that the way that the taxpayer framed his suit at the court essentially got it thrown out, and that's why he lost. But what I put up there, there's a difference between a challenge of jurisdiction and a challenge of valuation. So if you're challenging the valuation, you have to name the county. If you're challenging the jurisdiction, you can name the Assessment Appeals Board. The next case is Verizon, and that was one that we had litigated at the board. And this is, again, a kind of technical procedural issue regarding Revenue and Taxation Code 5148. And I guess you can think of this case as the one that's about the word all doesn't mean all. And what 5148 says is that defendant has to name all the counties. And what that really means, the court decided, was that the defendant needs to name all the counties in which it's asking for a refund. So even if it has property in a particular county, if they're not asking for a refund from that county, they don't have to name them as a defendant. This next one, Olive Lane, has to do with eminent domain. And I'm sure most or all of you are familiar with the base year value transfer that happens or that's available when property is taken by eminent domain. And what had happened in this case was that in 2003, the taxpayer's property was taken, and then they purchased replacement property in 2006. And then in 2008, which is 4 years after the property was taken, they had filed a claim for a base year value transfer. And what the taxpayers had argued was that even though it's past the 4 years, which is required by the statute, what they'd argued was that, well, there's no time limitation in the Constitution, so that statute is unconstitutional. And even if it's unconstitutional, even if it's not unconstitutional, the statute doesn't have any limitation on prospective relief, right? Only on retroactive relief. And the court first said that the Constitution, it's true that the Constitution doesn't provide any statute of limitations, but the legislature can impose their own reasonable limitations, so that's okay. But then on the second argument, the court actually agreed with the taxpayer and said, because of the legislative language and the legislative intent, they don't see Section 68 as prohibiting prospective relief, even if the base year value transfer claim is filed after the 4 years. So this is I think, pretty significant in the interpretation of Section 68. And I believe there was a depublication request filed, or it's in that process right now. This next case was out of Los Angeles, and it has to do with legal entities and the rules surrounding change in ownership of property that's owned by legal entities. And what I've done here in this slide, just so to make it easier to talk about, is kind of boil it down to its essence. And the one thing I think probably that's important to realize is in the before and after pictures, not all of it's there yet, there's obviously something missing, but the part that's there in the after, the Ocean Avenue entity owning the hotel, that doesn't change. So throughout this, through all of the transfers that go on, the Ocean Avenue still owns this hotel. And that's sort of the key to why this wasn't reassessed. So the first thing that happened was that, and this involves Michael Dell of Dell Computer fame. So Susan Dell, who was Michael Dell's wife, owned an entity which bought 49% of Ocean Avenue, the entity that owned the hotel. And then Michael Dell, through an entity, again, purchased about 42.5% of Ocean Avenue. And then another entity, Miramar Hotel, which had various owners, including Michael Dell, purchased the remaining 8.5% of the hotel. So, I'm sorry, of the entity that owns the hotel. So essentially what you can see is the owners before and the owners after, indirectly through the entities, are completely different. But there was no reassessment here because of the way that the rules are set up. Right, so the result here is that 100% of Ocean Avenue transferred, and 100% of the hotel was transferred indirectly. But there's no change in control under Revenue Tax Code Section 64, which is the important section, the section that was at issue. And oops, sorry about that. And the important thing to remember here is there were a lot of arguments that the assessor had made, and the court essentially said, well, that's the way the statutes are, that's the way the rules are written, and you have no choice but to follow the statutes and rules as they're written. And so there was a legislative attempt to change the result of this case, which was AB 2372, which did not pass. And again, there's a description, I'm not going to read it, but there's a description of what that tried to do. So instead of requiring control by one person or entity, what it did was if you transfer a certain percentage of that entity, there's going to be a change in ownership of the real property held by that entity. This next case is about intangibles, and it involved a hotel, and this was in San Mateo County. It involved the Half Moon Bay Hotel, which probably many of you are familiar with. And the assessor used an income method where I think he applied the purchase price, but he used an income method to verify that purchase price. And the issues boiled down to, it's hard to read there, but hopefully you have the materials. The issues boils down to a number of intangibles, which the taxpayer said, well, those are intangibles, you have to pull those out of the income method. And the assessor said, well, we already pulled those out by pulling out management fees, essentially, management and franchise fees. And so the really interesting thing about this is the standard that the court had applied. Because they had applied what's known as a de novo standard, which means they could take a look at everything brand new, as if it's coming to them first. But they said they would apply that standard, but then they looked at all the evidence that the assessor had. So I guess one of the takeaways from this is probably to put as much evidence into the record as you can as to why a particular piece of property was assessed in a particular way. And then finally, this is the most recent case, was Chevron, which involved supplemental assessments and valuation of an oil well, or oil well fields, I guess I should say. And what I've done is I've listed some of the facts, and then I've listed sort of the bigger issues here. There were a number of issues, not all of them are listed here, but sort of what I had considered to be the bigger issues I had included. And I think one of the more sort of interesting arguments that the taxpayer had made was that you can't use the cost approach, you have to use an income approach to value this new construction, and the court disagreed. And you can read all the gory details in the case if you're interested. And then finally, what I wanted to talk about a little bit was, I think many of the assessors know that the legal department provides written legal opinions on property tax issues at taxpayers' and assessors' offices' request. And so what I wanted to do was review just a little bit about how we do that and how you can go about requesting a legal opinion if you feel that it's necessary. I think one of the important things to remember is that when we write a legal opinion, they are not binding on any party. They're not binding on the taxpayers. They're not binding on the assessors either. I think they do provide some weight. They are referenced sometimes in court cases when they're brought up by either side, but it turns out often that, well, it seems that the courts will give them weight if they like what it says. So if they like it, they weigh it. If they don't like it, they say we don't have to weigh it. But what we really like when we get these requests for legal opinions are a complete statement of facts and other information. I mean, especially when it involves a lot of transfers, when it involves trust documents. We like to have copies of the relevant parts of the document or the contracts or the leases or organizational charts and diagrams, whatever will make it easier for us to discern exactly what happened. And then what we also would like is an analysis of the material facts. And especially if there are relevant authorities that speak to particular issues, then it's always helpful to include those authorities because that gives us a little bit of a head start, and it would hopefully help us to get you that legal opinion a little bit quicker than we ordinarily would. Typically, it takes about 60 to 90 days is our turnaround time. Depending on the issue, it could take shorter or it could take longer. But again, any information, any analysis, citations that you can provide will always help shorten that time down. We also would like disclosure regarding whether an AAB hearing on a particular matter has been scheduled or whether that particular matter is in litigation. So if the matter is in litigation, we will not issue a legal opinion because it's already at the court. If the matter is at the AAB, we always offer the non-requesting party an opportunity to provide the facts and information that they feel is relevant. And in order to make that process go more smoothly and more quickly, what we recommend is that the taxpayer and the assessor's office get together and they make a joint request with stipulated facts. Because if they can sort of hash all that out and then send it to us, something that they've agreed on, that always makes it easier for us. And again, it can shorten the turnaround time. And then finally, I'd wanted to provide, this is the address that you send your opinion request to. And also, before you send the request, I guess I would encourage you to think about whether you need the opinion request or if you need to just talk to somebody and sort of hash things out, ideas or things. We are more than happy to talk with you on the phone or through email, and we do this regularly. In fact, Rich Benson is a regular caller. I talk with him regularly, and we're always happy to do that. Yeah, a lot of theories, but he's got some good ideas. I see Dan and I have talked frequently as well. So we are more than happy to talk with you or to answer your emails. Don't get offended if I forward your call to another attorney on our staff. But we want to, I guess, provide the best and most efficient service and answers, that we can. And so my phone number is there. Bob Tucker is the Assistant Chief Counsel. And the best way actually to reach me is through email. And my email address is richard.moon@boe.ca.gov. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And again, I know Richard makes himself available to you and to not only in terms of your ability to call, but also at your conferences and whatnot. And we just encourage a good, positive dialogue there so that as much as possible we can find ourselves understanding at least the, whether it's a ruling, a court ruling, or an interpretation, on the same page as much as possible. So we appreciate Richard and his good work, and also your ability to just continue to have dialogue with him. For our next time together right now, we're going to have a panel come forward, and I'm going to introduce the panel members and ask them, as they're coming forward, I'm going to tell you who they are. You know who they are already, but I'm going to talk a little bit about their positions, what they're doing. So if the panelists will just come on up, take your seat at the appropriate name plaque there. We have Leslie Davis, the assessor of Calaveras County. We have Ernie Dronenburg, San Diego County assessor, former BOE member, too. We have John Tuteur, Napa County assessor. We have Dean Kinnee, who's with us, who is the acting property tax director, or director of property tax for the Board of Equalization. And we have David Yeung, the property tax manager, with us at the Board of Equalization. We're missing one. There we are. I saw an empty chair over there. Let me do this. I'm going to go ahead and give each one of them a chance. And the way we'll work with this is, I'm going to start with Dean, because Dean's going to give us a historical perspective on role, relationship. So I'm going to ask Dean to start. And I think each one of you, I know, have some specific issues you'd like to talk about and deal with that. So I think we're just going to go right down the line there. And then once you finish your questions and discussion, I think we're going to open it up then for dialogue and questions that the board members may have in regards to those issues. And I'm going to start with Mr. Kinnee.
Thank you, Senator Runner. Afternoon, board members, assessors, other attendees. My name is Dean Kinnee. I'm with the Property Taxes Department. I've been with the board since 1990. Before that, I worked in Yolo County, started my career in 1984. I think I'll just give some high-level milestones through the decades of the board and the assessors and their interaction, kind of set the stage. It all began with the first Constitution in 1849 that set in place, property taxes as the major revenue source for local government and the state. There was a statewide property tax rate. Assessments were to be made by the elected assessors. As you might imagine, with the state's interest in there and assessments done at local levels, some concerns arose to uniformity, equalization of assessments, and shifting a burden among taxpayers around the state. So in 1870, the legislature created what was sort of the first board. It appointed the controller and 2 governor appointees to review county assessment practices. But quickly in 1874, the California Supreme Court kind of ruled the board unconstitutional because the duty of assessments was at the county level and not the board, and the board didn't really have any power to do anything. With the adoption of a new Constitution in 1879, the board in its pretty much current format was established with 4 elected members for geographic districts and the state controller sitting as the 5th member. In 1880, the Supreme Court clarified again that it's the assessor's job to assess individual properties, and the board's role was to equalize the roll. So the board could issue equalization orders saying you need to move your whole roll X%, but the board did not get involved with individual properties, which is still the case today. Up to about 1910, the board had it, because of the statewide interest in property taxes, the board issued quite a few equalization orders raising assessments statewide. Between 1910 and 1933, there was a shifting of kind of the state's interest in the local property taxes. The statewide rate was abolished. Utilities were being assessed on like gross receipts, so there was kind of a lessening of the state's interest in it, and there weren't many equalization orders issued. That all kind of changed in 1933 with the Riley-Stewart plan, which gave the assessment of utilities and railroads to the board. And given that the board, needed equalization at the local assessments and the state for fairness, the board went out, reviewed assessments, issued a bunch of equalization orders. I think there are like 40 of them for 40 counties between 33 and 35, which the local government, always being clever, if I could trust the historical documents, I believe that some of they stamped on the taxpayers' bills that went up, increased on the order of the board, which counties reporting at the board was saying what was due to assessment practice at the local level. I think cooler heads prevailed and figured this isn't a good way to deal with this issue. And in 1938, at the urging of the county assessors, the Assessment Standards Division was created. The Assessors Association was very instrumental in appearing before the legislature and speaking in support of the division, helping us get the appropriate budget, and that kind of set the stage for moving forward in standardizing assessments. It was the start of Assessor's Handbook sections, setting up a standard mapping system, standard records. It kind of really set the stage of where we were going. In 1947, the Assessment Practice Survey Program was set up. Initially was set up to go out and review assessors' programs, to identify the resource needs, the staffing needs, and help them set it up. I can wrap it up quick. Is that my time frame? Oh, okay. They had bells here earlier. Okay. So the Assessment Practice Survey Program went out and did the first rule, and it really was to identify resource needs for the assessors. Not surprisingly, it found that there was a lack of adequate staffing and budget at the local level, which is kind of a constant theme over the years. Then in 1966, there was AB 80, the Property Taxes Assessment Reform Act. It revisited, I think we all kind of know that, it fell out of the scandals of the 60s. Although the board always had the role of issuing guidance, prescribing forms, and enforcing them, it put that more in law and made it a mandate that the board do that. It expanded the survey program, put it on. We had to visit every county on a 6-year cycle. It set up conflict of interest laws for the assessors and board, and it set up the appraiser certification program that we know today with the mandatory training. The next thing was Prop 13 in 1978. That drove a lot of collaboration with the assessors and the board, interpreting the Constitution, the statutes, putting up many rules on board. Kind of did away with the equalization orders, since with Prop 13 and base year values, I don't know how can you adjust the rule anymore? Over the years, we revisited with the assessors the survey program in 1980, again in 96, and it was changed. Most recently, we've worked with the Assessors Ad Hoc Committee, retooling the program, and we look forward to working with the assessors on that. In the early 90s, we revisited the working through the handbooks, pretty intense process. I think we're due for maybe another round of that. The handbooks are falling into a little disrepair, and I think that's a good opportunity to interact with the board and the assessors and get some of the younger staff engaged in what we do as kind of the older guard is moving out. I know Leslie will talk about, I think she's going to touch on some successes we've had working with the Education Committee, with the Forums Committee. Over the years, I know a Legal Entity Ownership Ad Hoc Committee was set up. We've worked closely with that, with Lisa Thompson spending a lot of time and working with LA and Santa Clara, and that's brought some good progress, good success. We look forward to continuing the work with that. In reviewing the historical documents on this, there's some recurring themes. There's always the tough issues that came up. Aircraft after World War II, aircraft's still around. Exemptions are still around, but it always comes back to the budgets and salaries, to track the staff that you need to do the job, training of staff, constant looking at the papers over the years with the presented at the Assessors Association meetings. It's the need for staff training on basic training, and then working and developing training and instructions on the more technical areas. Public education, I think Larry Ward spoke a little bit of it, you know, with the Prop 8. I don't know about you, but we still get all the taxpayers saying we've got it all wrong. Prop 13, you can't raise my rate more than my value more than 2%. I think that's been stressed when I was reviewing the papers over the years, that the constant need to educate the public and reach out to them so they understand what you're doing, why they do it. Because and avoid, if you don't tell them that, they'll form their own opinions. And then the issue on reviewing the papers over the years was the need for collaboration over the years. You know, I think one of the big moments have arisen. I think the board staff and the assessors have worked closely together. I think we have the common goal, proper uniform assessments. I know I've enjoyed working with the association and the assessors. Our challenges going forward, I think when I spoke to you in SQA in 2013, and I haven't looked at the data because it's a little depressing, but that time in the County Assessed Properties Division, we turned over 80% of the positions in a 5-year time. You're aware, because of salaries and compensation packages, we can't lure staff away from the counties like we once did. I know that makes you feel good, but it puts us in a challenging situation where we're bringing in staff with no experience, and we have to get them up to speed and teach them, you know, how to give guidance, how to train, and how to audit. So those are our challenges going forward. You know, I look forward working with the Assessors Association, try to solve those problems and address it. I know it's similar problems to most counties, or many. I know Leslie will touch on that. So, you know, I see that as our big, in the next few years for ours, looking internally to train our own staff to get them up to speed to replace, you know, those of us that will be retiring in the next few years.
Thank you. Let me just also say, too, we have some mics out there. If there's a point to where, you know, one of the panelists brings up an issue to which you'd like to chime in on, you certainly have a chance to do that at these public mics that you see right in front of us. And I guess if you wave at us or something, I'll know that you're there, but I'll keep an eye out on those. I'd like to now have Leslie Davis make some comments. And for our next point of discussion, I don't think our board members probably any discussion with Mr. Kinnee, do you? Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Senator Runner, but let me start by saying, Dean, when you're talking about the older guard, do not look specifically at me.
I noticed you had the
John
second low
and
certification.
Ernie down here, old. Yeah. So I was asked to talk today about how we might have future opportunities to work together, review some of our successes from a small county perspective. And as I started to think about it, all I could come up with were ways to whine at you. But I don't really want to do that. So I'm going to call this more musings from a small county assessor. Many years ago, following the passage of Prop 13, I think assessors' offices were far more engaged with the Board of Equalization. We were getting daily, if not hourly, Q&A letters from the BOE on how we should implement Prop 13. We got tremendous training immediately after and in the years following the passage of Prop 13 and all of the implementing legislation. And that was extremely helpful, I think, for smaller counties who didn't have the staff available to analyze the legislation or who had the staff available to train their own people. That transitioned over the years due to staff constraints both at the board level and at the county level. California Assessors Association is now actually starting to put on some classes. Our California Assessors Administrative Services Association, which we refer to as CASA, is putting on between 10 and 15 courses a year on change in ownership and exemption issues. The BOE is even transitioning now to online classes. Technology has also changed the landscape. We have 3 main property tax systems in the state. We have CREST, that's been around forever, Megabyte, Thomson Reuters. And what's happened as multiple counties have engaged with one of those vendors is we're relying on one another more than we are relying on the State Board of Equalization when we're talking about how to do something. But There are still areas where we continue to partner with the board. I really want to draw attention to some of those. And even though I'm going to compliment Dean, I'm still stinging from the older guard comment. I've been involved in forms with BOE since my days back in Contra Costa County some 30 years ago, and that was a very tedious time. We literally cut and pasted forms and submitted them for approval and then had them typeset. Over the last 10 years, as you've changed your staff and Sherry Kinkle's come on board, we've moved from that cut and paste mentality to very professional-looking, user-friendly forms. And then Webster Guillory, our good friend from Orange County, saw an opportunity to build on that progress, and CAA's launched the eForms program partnering with the Board of Equalization. And I believe that we have to shout out about that. It should be a model across the nation for improved efficiency and partnerships between state and local government. In the education arena, we've moved from traditional classroom situations to online and WebEx presentations, and board staff stepped up and helped. I see Lisa Thompson in the audience. She knows what she's done, but I want to speak to what she's done as well. She's helped work with our CASA trainers and our CAA trainers to improve our WebEx presentations. She responded to requests that we've made to make Course 1 more readily available for our new hires, our new appraisers who needed certification. And she helped us utilize WebEx to present a Q&A on open space properties. She helped develop an exam for auditor appraisers to meet the requirements of R&T Code Section 670D. And what's the result? The result is we now have training classes that are reaching hundreds of students at a time. They're providing cost-effective training for everyone, including State Board of Equalization staff. As we look to the future, I know we can expect that same help from Ben Tang and his team that we got from Lisa and her team on educational issues. I know our eForms project will gain more support because it really helps us serve the public in a cost-effective way and an extremely efficient way, and I think we can all look to that with pride. David Gow and Dean Kinnee deserve credit. Yes, I'm giving you a compliment here. For modeling the type of collaborative behavior that has built those successes that we all now enjoy. David and Dean have taken the lead when we've had issues as diverse as the fire tax, and yes, I do call that a tax, and the survey program. They understand the impacts on our operations as well as issues surrounding your board's policy issues, and I think you're well served by Dean and David in those management leadership level roles. As we look to the future, and this is where I'm probably going to get a little snarky, we have an opportunity to improve and expand our relationships between elected officials. And by that I mean the relationships between elected assessors and your board. We understand taxpayers and interested parties want their taxes as low as possible. We're in the trenches every day dealing with those kinds of questions. We know what it's like to deal with those demands, and when issues come up before your board, we are the subject matter experts, and we need to reach a point where we can work together to meet that responsibility to our constituents and to protect everyone's interest. Now, I do know that as I criticize, I have to compliment, and I do want to recognize, Senator Runner, you and your staff. You've been in my office. You've talked to me when you've been in Calaveras County making speeches. Your staff has been extremely helpful dealing with my constituents' concerns about the fire tax. And what I would like to say is we need to build on that. And I don't want to just say it to you as the board. I want to say it to all of us. We need to build on that. As a small county assessor, it's extremely easy for me to fall back on the excuse that I'm busy. And I am. And I think you can say the same thing. I'll admit I haven't been as proactive in meeting with you, Senator Runner, or other board members when issues have arisen. And I think it's time that we do that. We have very serious issues facing us in pretty short order, and as I look around the room, I see Larry Stone straight ahead, and I'm reminded that embedded software is one of those issues where we are the subject matter experts. And in fact, I'm not, but I do know the people who are elected officials throughout the state who are, and I have to recommend to you that we work to improve our relationships, that we work to build trust and our respect for one another so that we can all do the work that we were elected to do. Thank you for your time here today to talk about how we might move forward into the future.
Okay, thank you. Let me just take a moment now to again, invite those who in the audience who might have some thoughts or comments about some of those issues that were just mentioned. Also turn to board members who may have a thought or a question. Member Yee?
Yes. Thank you, Senator Runner. So, subject matter experts on embedded software, will you please stand? And this is one where I hope the white paper will try to define some next directions and steps, but definitely very interested and committed to working through this issue. Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Runner.
Oh, yes, Member Horton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you recommend systemically how we can work together using embedded software as one of the ways? I know the board has sought to sort of take that issue on and sort of bounce back from one end of the court to the other because of the complexity of it and trying to figure out, is it a legislative fix or is it an administrative fix, or is this, how do we approach this? But the question is there a recommendation that you would have that would allow us to systemically set up a system by which, not only with this issue, but we begin to interact and engage collaboratively on all major issues?
I think we have the beginnings of that with the breakout that we're going to be having this afternoon and that we had a year ago when we met with your board. I think it's important for us to have very open lines of communication so that we're comfortable picking up the phone and calling you. You're comfortable in the reverse calling us. So I think that we're starting that. And we need to have that trust and those relationships in order for our embedded software people, our experts, to connect with you. We have an interested parties process that we use quite regularly when we're doing handbook or I guess I would call them controversial forms. And that's generally assessor's office staff coming to a meeting with your board staff and others who may be engaged in that particular issue. I would suggest that when we're talking about something as important as embedded software, and I do believe there's a legislative piece to it, but when we're talking about something that important, we need to be talking to you directly about our concerns so that you can hear them and not in the very rigid public process that is so often restrictive of the kinds of comments that perhaps need to be made.
See Dan Goodwin over there to...
Thank you, Senator Runner.
He's going to give us the answer to embedded software right now.
Yes, sir. That's kind of what I'm going to do.
You've got yourself in trouble.
So I'm glad you asked. So I was as Leslie brought up the issue and the about the subject matter expert and Controller Yee, the questions she asked, and I got to thinking about that, about subject matter expert stand-up. And I thought, so in the context of any area of concern where no one really knows the whole picture, who's worth listening to? And I think what Assessor Davis was bringing up is, so those participants in that subject matter who don't have a vested interest, don't have a personal bias because they don't have a financial stake in the game versus an advocate for a particular point of view, someone who's hired to be an advocate for a point of view, someone who's leave enough in that pathway. So as assessors, the assessors are basically a disinterested party from the standpoint of a bias, but yet an interested party from a duty standpoint. And so we look at this embedded software question and say, well, what is it all about? And how do we find out facts? Where do we collect information? What are some practical things? Even things like, so if anybody's looked at buying a new car lately, if you look at a new car that's a middle range $40,000 car, you probably have $10,000 worth of embedded software in that thing now. Everything from sensors on cars to the side of you, backup stuff, things that control the computer that controls the ignition, the gasoline consumption, the whole range of things. Now, as far as I know, no one's brought to the DMV the need to reduce the tax on vehicles because of the embedded software in the car. But just as a common sense kind of thing, those are things that assessors start looking at. So I'm only contributing to the part that when it does come to a discussion, when those presenting are have a bias to advocate for the reduction of taxes to a specific client versus an assessor who's trying to study this issue as an objective party, you know, to some degree, we might be that subject matter expert. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comment? Okay, let's go on to John Tutor, Napa County Assessor.
Thank you, Senator.
And it says here the longest serving right now assessor. Is that?
Actually, I'm the third longest serving assessor in California history.
Oh, well, there you go.
And of course I look that stuff up all the time, right? But I did want to let you know, just to put me in perspective, I'd been on the Board of Supervisors for 6 years when Prop 13 passed, so that's how far back I go. And my history with the Board of Equalization, I came from the outside of the office. I'd heard equalization matters on the Board of Supervisors, but I wasn't an appraiser and I didn't come from inside the office. And I still remember shortly after taking office in 1987, before most of you were born, that I got a call saying, we're from the Board of Equalization and we're here to help you. And it was true. I mean, I've had my differences with board members, none of the existing board members, thank you very much, but some earlier board members whose initials were Dean Andall and I went around and had some relatively heated but gentlemanly arguments. And throughout it all, the elected board, even those members of the elected board that I did not agree with either their philosophy or their means, the staff remained steady, the staff remained objective, the staff remained there for us, and vice versa. And I think that's a tradition that will continue to hold for many years. And regardless of the turnover in staff, I believe that we can all of us can look forward to direct, intelligent, and helpful information from the staff. Not only the staff we deal with every day, but often the staff, as Leslie mentioned, of your own staffs on the elected board members. So that's a theme that I think we all ought to be aware of, and I'm very proud that that's gone on for 28 years, and I hope for another 28 years so I can catch up with Bill Copran's grandfather, who served for 56 years as county assessor in Sierra County. I'm not quite there yet, only halfway. I also wanted to mention that what the board produces in addition to the staff are some very vital tools for us. I use the website all the time. I look at the letters to assessors, I look at annotations, I use the handbook. I get somebody challenging me on why we assess something. I'm able to go into the handbook, pull up whatever section it is, copy it, send it to them in an email, and that almost always settles it. I'm not talking about litigation, but I'm talking about the kinds of give and take that you have with property owners and others that have issues with what you think you're doing correctly. So those are vital tools, and I look forward to the new website for the surveys that's being developed. I've read 500 surveys probably in my time. I think I've been through 5 of them, and they're helpful. They can be worked on in terms of the content and the format, but they're very helpful. And I think if what I hear about the new website for the surveys is true, it will help to distill the themes on surveys, the recommendations, so that any of us, like we turn to letters to assessors or handbooks or annotations, can turn to the survey website as something to help us when we have a question about did we do that disabled veterans exemption correctly or not, because we have examples of some of us who didn't. So that's very helpful when that's pointed out. The other thing is it's a two-way street. I won't mention any names, but I get occasional calls, especially as Dean mentioned with the turnover in your own staff. What about the Williamson Act? I wasn't there when it was passed, but almost. But, you know, we've been dealing with the Williamson Act for many years, and oftentimes there are questions that come up about the Williamson Act or conservation easements or something else where we've been dealing with those in my county, and others of us have been dealing with it, and I hope all members of the board staff feel free to call assessors and their staff. I said to the newly elected assessor in L.A. County that L.A. County is sort of a mini Board of Equalization for most of us. We turn to them often for special questions and topics, and I'm hoping that the board can see all of us in our special areas of expertise as something that we can be of help with. I also want to welcome the board's interest in working on things with us. I'm just going to use one brief example, but we produce, as assessors for the Department of Aviation, a list of aircraft. We also produce, or we're asked to begin producing for the use tax section of your board, a list of aircraft. And it seemed to me that why are we producing two lists? And I do want to say almost immediately the board staff worked on it, got in touch with their other state agency, the Department of Aviation, and managed to avoid us having to do the same thing. So that was it's a small thing, but those kind of small things, as Leslie mentioned, make us all more efficient, helps us deal with whatever budget crises we have, and just make service to the people of California that much better and more rational. The other thing that I want to mention, and I hate to pick on Member Yee, but she's constantly calling me and asking when she can come by to say hello. And I can tell you in 28 years, that's the first member of the Board of Equalization who ever called me and asked to drop by. Dean Andol would call, but I won't mention any of those phone calls. But I've met with Member Yee in my own county on a couple of occasions. I don't think there were any huge specific issues. It was just a chance to stay in touch. I think Senator Runner, Leslie mentioned you're doing that, and I know Chair Horton has reached out. We hope that that same tradition will continue with the newly elected board members in their counties, and I look forward to the session today to meet with each of you during the short breakout.
Okay. Thank you, John. Any comments or questions, thoughts? Member Yee.
Thank you, Senator Runner. I just wanted to compliment Assessor Tuteur, and many of you bring a lot of institutional memory to the work that you do every day, and I'm just always appreciative, John, of your vast knowledge of Prop 13 issues, and not afraid to really dig back into the history and to offer guidance when that's appropriate. So I just want to thank you for that service that you continue to provide for the public. And then also just want to acknowledge your handling of the recent earthquake, and certainly with a lot of property owners who were distressed. Thank you for your leadership on that.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go on down to now Assessor Ernest Dronenburg and some thoughts and comments.
Thank you, Senator Runner. I don't want to repeat, but I'd like to endorse everything that Leslie and John have said. Those were ideas that I had also thought about. I wanted to just quickly touch on some that are different from those, but certainly not to say that what they've said is not exactly what I had in my notes. That's what happens when you're number 4 speaker. I'm scheduled to talk about the large county perspective, but certainly it should be understood that the large counties are not self-sufficient. We do more than smaller counties, but we still rely on the board very significantly, especially me, because I know what fat budgets they have up there, having been there for a while. But there are some things that we're experiencing, I think you may be experiencing too, that I wanted to highlight. 40 to 50% of my senior staff are going to retire in the next 5 years. 40 to 50%. That's to highlight the real need I have for advanced courses, because I've got younger, talented people, but we got to get them trained so that they can step into those spots. So the advanced courses is what I really need, and to put them online. Online is so much more efficient for our guys. I mean, they give enough time to do these things. We do them online. They're a lot more efficient. So those are two real critical elements that I'm facing. I've got some that are within the next 2 years, and I might just quit if they all go in the next 2 years. But it's the baby boomer thing. We had that baby boomer rush for good county jobs, and so now the baby boomers are bailing out on us. One other thing that I wanted to talk about, and it's something that we have really strived for in my office, and that might be if you could design a customer service module. In my office, customer service is the most important thing. And that's not just for the assessor's office. As you know, I'm the assessor recorder clerk. I have 415 people in my office, and we all now believe strongly in customer service. We had to go outside to get a customer service trainee, but we brought the customer service trainee in to train a leader group, and now they've trained everybody in the whole agency. And if you could, like I said, we're not self-sufficient, but we have extra money. I didn't say that for the record. We don't. We prioritize our spending sometimes.
The supervisors out there from San Diego County, he didn't mean that.
We prioritize our spending because customer service has so many benefits to the administrator. In that if people are complying right and they understand the law, and that's something I've believed since 1978, when the second most important thing in 78 was Prop 13. The first was my first election to the Board of Equalization in 1978. But other than that, customer service, and that's the really important thing, and it's embedded in the California Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, which I helped draft, is that people are not trying to do things wrong. They just don't have the tools. And that's what good customer service is about, educating the people, being there, having them think of you as a helper, not as an adversary when they're on the phone or they're in front of you, going the extra mile with them. So that kind of module, if you could put that in, that would be really great. And an endorsement of, like I said, John and Leslie would sum up my brief remarks.
Okay. I'm going to ask Mr. Kinnee real quick. The idea of, again, retirement is an issue that we face too in regards to the percentages and whatnot. So in terms of some of the training objectives that we're working with even internally, Dean, you got some thoughts on that?
Yeah, regarding online courses, we're working on, it's not advanced, course 3, getting that on, which is a basic cost course, I believe, getting that online shortly. We're working on the Williamson Act course 52, which is advanced online. Shortly, we hope to get course 5, the income approach, online. So we've been moving that way. We've worked closely with the assessors on the WebEx. We did the California Land Conservation Act webinar. We have been working on, or committed to, presenting one on, I believe, possessory interest for a while. Correct? Yes, well, it's finding staff to do that. So we're working on that. So we're moving in that direction, but it's getting that accomplished with our challenges of staying on the cycle for surveys, 11, 12 a year, dealing with these other issues arise, and since we are no longer attracting people from the counties with the basic knowledge that we can build on, and we have to start from the bottom of build, it's a resource issue for us. I mean, to me, training is the most important to reinvest. Train our own staff, work with the assessors. Sherry Kinkle's done Lisa did a fine job over there. Sherry Kinkle's getting new people involved in training, so we are moving in that direction.
Okay. Some other comments? Yes, Member Horton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to share one of the things that we've been able to do at the Board of Equalization that hasn't really come to its fruition yet is an effort to capture the historical knowledge that exists within our organization. So was the bringing on individuals to actually, it's kind of like a cross-training strategy, but individuals that are retiring, before they retire, we actually go ahead and bring the individual into that position and allow that transitional period of time. I believe the Department of Personnel has sort of approved 2 to 3 months of that transitional time. So you actually have that individual in position, and then you have the historical knowledge, and they're transferring that information to the new employee. Because the board is facing somewhat of a 43 to 47% of our employees will actually retire, and 100,000 state employees will retire. So this is something that the entire state of California is going to suffer from, I think, the loss of historical knowledge.
We're doing that somewhat. Shadowing is what we call it.
But you have that extra budget too, by the way.
I deny. I can never confirm or deny that. It was not me.
Last on the panel, we have David Yeung. David is the property tax manager for us. I'm going to just ask you to fill in, David, some other thoughts that you might want to fill in behind some of the issues that are brought up.
Yes.
Maybe some thoughts. I don't give you any idea. Go ahead. You've got some thoughts.
Thank you, Senator Runner. When I first was asked to be on this panel, I immediately panicked because I really don't like public speaking. So my way of coping with it is to over-prepare. And as you can see here, I got a whole folder full of stuff on stuff that we could possibly do in the future.
You can start with the first page and the last, and then
You
with the
got
last
it.
page. All the stuff in between you can do a memo on.
You got it. You got it. A couple, Dean's already mentioned our need to train staff, and that is nowhere more evident in the quality and quantity of staff that we're able to hire. In the past, as Dean have already mentioned, we were able to basically pick up people from the counties with appraisal experience and with assessment experience. That is becoming exceedingly hard to do. So we're looking at all types of ways where we could have somebody that we picked up perhaps with appraisal experience, but not necessarily assessment experience from an appraiser's office that you would get from an appraiser's office, and somehow give that person the required experience. One of the things that came to my mind would be if we could perhaps do, as we said, either a shadowing or some kind of mentoring program where we could actually place somebody in your office either to shadow somebody on the assessment of PIs, which outside of the assessment world, nobody actually really has any experience doing. CLCA, any of the restricted property, somehow give them an opportunity to observe, work, do, actually handle, and learn from that placement. And vice versa. If there is anything that the board does that is opaque and you believe your staff would gain benefit from placing somebody within our ranks for a little bit and seeing how that is handled, that would be a tremendous move. The other one, okay, first page and last page. my last page item was perhaps a little technical thing. The board right now is exploring all different ways of using portals, informational portals. The idea of setting up an assessors only portal came up. Would there be any interest in setting something up like that? What should we put on it? What would be helpful to you? How can we develop it? Is there some kind of working group we can put together that we could explore this option? All these are questions. All these are things in the future that we could partnership on and move both of our roles forward. That's my first and last.
Okay.
Senator Runner, I had on my notes the talk about how helpful the California Assessor Association listserv has been for all of us. We put information out, we ask for comps, we do all of those things, and we have an assessors only listserv that we use. I probably use it too much, I hear from my colleagues. But that kind of model could be something that the board could set up with the assessors on the board platform instead of our own platform, and have an ability for both your staff and ourselves to correspond on issues that arise. So that's a great idea.
I think I see Mr. Kinnee writing down those thoughts and ideas. I think the exchange of individuals and some training aspect is some very interesting issue, and that is where you have expertise or need expertise to be able to trade and assign people for some time for temporary placement in order to get that expertise might be something, again, since we all right now suffer and are challenged with that issue of filling in behind, finding expertise, it might be an important issue. You know, the only trouble is if we send somebody to one of their offices, we don't want any job offers given to them, right? That would be one of the concerns I think that we'd have to get worked out right away. But again, those are kinds of things that we can work with. Again, I appreciate the time. I think one of the issues I think that is so important for all of us, and we'll all have a chance to make some other comments here at the end here, but for me, I think the issue of building on relationships is really important. As issues come before us, it's a lot easier to pick up the phone and talk to somebody who we know, who we've met, who we've sat down, we've talked. And so I know I'm going to continue to go out and visit you in your offices. There's some I still didn't get to, some are just harder to get to, and I'll get there. But I think those are the kinds of things that we need to continue to do. And let me just offer this invitation: when you're in our areas, you know, each of the members spend some time in Sacramento. My main office is in Sacramento. When you're in, and that's a place where oftentimes you can end up gravitating to for whatever reasons. You know, I hope you'll give us a call. And if you're in town, come by and stop by. If I'm not there, there certainly have staff there. We'll be glad to talk with you. I know oftentimes some of your assessors are meeting over with our property tax folks. And let me always invite you to come over and talk by the member's office too, and take some time to do that. I'm going to let each of the members make some closing remarks if they'd like to. But before I do that, earlier I forgot to introduce two folks who I think are of great interest to both you and also to us as they work through the issue and leading the organization. Cynthia Bridges is back in the back. Cynthia is our executive director. Cynthia, you want to stand up there? And Randy Ferris is back there, our chief counsel. And to that end, I just want to go ahead and I'll ask members if you want to make a closing remark or two. And
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, over the last year or so, we've made some progress, and we have not always agreed, but we have always been able to share our opinions and our thoughts through exercise such as this, as well as some of the hearings of the Board of Equalization. But I believe that we really need to sort of consummate that into an ad hoc committee, something that is systemic, something that is institutional, that occurs on a regular basis, where we're actually coming together on a regular basis. This last year has sort of taught me something, that if we don't come together and solve the problems, the courts will. And they may not always get it right, or the legislature will, and they may not always get it right. And quite frankly, leadership is not without a void. If we don't get together, the Board of Equalization will seek to solve the problem. And that's not always healthy, to do that without the assessors engaging and involved. And so I want to encourage that type of activity as we go forward.
Okay, Member Yee.
Thank you, Senator Renner, and I want to thank the panelists. And I think there were some good ideas that were shared today. I'm really intrigued by this idea of a portal to facilitate ongoing sharing of ideas and hopefully facilitate our communication outside of our public proceedings, so that there can be hopefully some regular sharing of information, best practices, identification of concerns, and I hope that we can make some headway with respect to getting that developed. The other thing I will say, too, is I think what's worked best, and I appreciate, John, your observation, and that is for each of us, particularly representing districts on this board, to really have that ongoing engagement. We live in a very, very diverse state. We work in a very, very diverse state. The issues will vary from region to region, and I think one of the things that I've appreciated very much is learning from my colleagues on the dais, but certainly learning from each of you, just even the great diversity of issues within a single equalization district, to be able to really stay up to date on the issues has been very, very helpful in guiding the work that we do. So look forward to continuing the work in my new capacity. Thank you.
Member Mandel.
I have two buttons here, and they're kind of the watchword of my faith, and when Leslie was talking, I had to dig them out, because one is "thou shalt not whine." It undercuts your argument to do so, to whine. And the other is question authority. whoever is appearing before the board, whether it's someone who's representing taxpayers or the assessors, everybody has a point of view. And I think every year when I've been here, my big pitch has been communication, which was really a self-interested pitch because I didn't have staff. And so I had a lot of things to read for every board meeting. And if there was a property tax issue, I had a big background in property tax, but if there was a property tax issue on the agenda, it was on top of everything else that was on the agenda. And so my pitch to the assessors was always, please contact the controller's office early and often with your information and your point of view so that we can give the controller the best advice that we possibly can on this issue that's coming before the board. So in our office, and if you know the current controller, always a big proponent of communication. I think Mr. Horton and I share an old favorite movie. We don't want to have a failure to communicate. We want to have good communication, and interested parties process, I think, serves a lot of good goals, even what sometimes may seem like a minor goal, but is often a big goal, which is that if you have a process and people participate in the process, win or lose at the end of the day, they're going to feel better that they were heard. But communication is key, and I didn't have to say that at the beginning, but I did have my buttons. If you want my button, you may have my thou shalt not whine button. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. And I think at this time, I think we're going to be, we'll adjourn in just a moment, but let me remind you that we are going to go back into our breakout groups, and they're listed here at the bottom of your page where they are. Let me just also say that we know Member Steele is not with us, but her staff is. And so let me remind those of you who would want to be meeting with that group that her staff is here. I've seen them. I know they are here. And so they certainly are available. They're out. See, they're waving their hands. There's some more over there. There's lots of people here. But let me invite you to be a part of that. And then I'm going to, I'm not sure who I'm turning it over here, if it's going to be Larry. Okay. Marc's going to come back up. And on his way up, I'm going to turn this part of the meeting back over to Mr. Horton so he can officially adjourn us this part.
The constitutional meeting of the Board of Equalization and the assessors are hereby adjourned. We now turn it over to the President-elect. Thank you so very much for your time and energies today.